Good morning, Mr. Chair. Can I do a mic check?
Different. So I can, because, if this just gets stuck on Untitled Chapter,
So I should do it as a letter?
yeah, exactly. So do it like you're submitting it.
Sorry, everybody, we're almost ready.
Yeah, but I guess it's a letter, I can send it to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't tell them, you want to tell them?
I'm almost ready, Matthew. As soon as this loads, I'm...
Oh, is he muted or? Good morning.
Councillor Chang, could you turn on your camera, please? Thank you.
Hello.
Good morning. I'm almost ready. As soon as my computer behaves itself. It's almost time for a break. I got my coffee. All right, good morning, everybody. I'm going to call this meeting to order. My name is Councillor Paul Ainsley. I'm the chair of the General Government Committee. The clerk tells me that we have quorum, so I'm now going to call meeting number 18 to order. Welcome, everybody, to all the lawyers in the room, and I understand there's lots of them. The committee is going to do our best to make sure your billable hours don't increase this morning, so thanks for being here. Today's meeting is being held by video conference and in person at City Hall in committee room number 1. This meeting is also being live streamed on youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. For the land acknowledgement, I would like to say on behalf of our colleagues and our city staff that although we may be meeting at different locations today, the General Government Committee would like to acknowledge the land we're meeting on is the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We would also like to acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty Number 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I just want to remind everybody, if you are registered to speak, and there is a speakers list, if you can please listen for me to call your name. I will be calling speakers in the order they appear on the list for each item. The list of speakers can also be reviewed or viewed online by visiting the General Government Committee on the city's website at toronto.ca/council and clicking on the speakers box for today's meeting. For the members of the committee, just a reminder that the clerk has provided all of our meeting materials on toronto.ca/council and on the clerk's meeting portal. They're available to members if you need any help with your devices. I also want to remind everybody to please submit your motions to Matthew@ggc@toronto.ca to help with any motions this morning. For declarations of interest, are there any under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, can I have a motion to confirm the minutes from our last meeting on October 16th, 2024? Councillor Burnside, moved by Councillor Burnside, all in favor? That carries. I'll go through the agenda. Our first item is GG 18.1, apportionment of property taxes as of November 20th, 2024. This is a public hearing scheduled for 9:30, and we do have a registered deputant, so I will hold that. Our next item is GG 18.2, cancellation, reduction, refund of property taxes or payment in lieu of taxes as of November 20th, 2024. And I have a deferral.
We have speakers.
Sorry?
Speakers.
Speaker, there's a my apologies. We have a speaker on that item. GG 18.3, largest property tax debtors with tax arrears greater than $500,000 as of June 30th, 2024. And this comes with a confidential attachment. Any holds? Moved by Councillor.
I'd like to hold.
All in favor? That carries.
Mr. Chair, I would like to hold.
Sorry, Councillor Mantis, you want to hold number 4? Okay.
I would like to hold number 4. Number 3, not number 4.
Sorry, am I on 3? My apologies. Number 3.
Number 4 has speakers.
Yep. Number 4, GG 18.4, award of document 455-392-8310 to GFL Environmental Incorporated for curbside collection services in District 2 for solid waste management services. We have a speaker, so I will hold that. GG 18.5, amendment to blanket contract number 470-22502 with Redflix Traffic Systems Canada Limited for the provision of automated speed enforcement cameras.
I would like to hold that, please.
Councillor Chang is holding number 5. Sorry, yeah, 5. Number 6, GG 18.6, amendment to blanket contract 470-24891 with CBV Collection Services Limited, 470-24892 with Gatestone & Co. Incorporated, and 470-24893 with Partners in Credit Incorporated for the collection services for Provincial Act fines for court services.
I would like to hold this one as well, please.
Councillor Chang wants to hold number 6. Number 7, GG 18.7, amendment to non-competitive contract 470-24899 with Gordon Food Services for the supply and delivery of groceries for senior services and long-term care. Can I have a mover? Councillor Holiday. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.8, amendment to purchase order number 6053869 with Montgomery CSUM Architects Incorporated for long-term care development projects for senior services and long-term care.
I'd like to hold this one, please.
Councillor Chang is holding number 7. Sorry, number 8. I need more coffee. Number 9, GG 18.9, amendment to purchase order number 6042899 with DTH for professional landscape architecture services during design and contract administration of the Phase 2 of the Lower Don Trail improvement for Parks, Forestry, and Recreation. Any holds? Councillor Crisanti is moving that. All in favor? Number 9 carries. Number 10, amendment to purchase order number 6051765 with CS&P Architects Incorporated for the design and construction professional services for the new Davisville Community Aquatic Center and Net Zero facility, which is in Ward 12.
I'd like to hold that, please.
Councillor Chang is holding number 12.
That's 10.
Sorry, 10. I'm gonna have a drink of coffee in a moment. There we go, now I'm rocking. All right. Number 11, GG 18.11, 40 College Street, amendment to purchase order number 6054325 with 1246175 Ontario Limited operating as active mechanical services for the replacement of building automation systems. Can I have a mover? Councillor Mantis, all in favor? That carries. GG 18.12, amendment to purchase order number 6054441 with OJCR Construction Limited for the general sewer and water main construction, related activities for residential service connections for Toronto and East York districts. Councillor Burnside would like to move it? Sorry? Councillor Burnside's moving. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.13, amendment to UBA Incorporated blanket contract 4702-5391 for the supply and delivery of sodium hypochlorite for Toronto Water. Thank you. Councillor Holiday's moving number 13. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.14, amendment to various blanket contracts and purchase order for the fire and life safety inspection, test, and maintenance services for fire alarm, sprinkler, standpipes, special suppression, fire extinguisher, and fire hydrants. Moved by Councillor Mantis. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.15, award of document number 45347140002 to JC Rock Limited for the supply and delivery of quarried crushed stone aggregate, sand, and gravel. Moved by Councillor Burnside. All in favor? That carries. Number 16, GG 18.16, award of document 47526006161 to Flow Clean Technology for catch basin inspection and cleaning services on arterial collector and local roads citywide for Toronto Water. Moved by Councillor Chang. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.17, non-competitive contract with Duracut Machine Knife Company Limited for the surfacing of ice resurfacer blades for park forestry and recreation. Moved by Councillor Holiday. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.18, award of the Province of Ontario's vendor of record tender number 19514 to qualified manufacturers, their authorized dealers and upfitters, supply and delivery of various vehicles under category 1, 2, and 3, general vehicle acquisition and upfitting services for Fleet Services Division. Please don't ask me any questions on that. Councillor Mantis, moved by. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.19, non-competitive contract with 1313135, Ontario Incorporated, operating as land and forest consulting for the prescribed burn services in 2025 to 2029 for Parks, Forestry, and Recreation. Moved by Councillor Crisanti. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.20, non-competitive contract with HP Canada for supply and provision of single and multi-function printers, plotters, and related maintenance and services.
I'd like to hold this, please.
Councillor Chang's holding number 20. GG 18.21, non-competitive contract with Moore Canada Corporation for the provision of renewal forms and parking permits.
I'd like to hold this as well, please.
Sorry, 21 is being held by Councillor Crisanti. I
Okay, great.
heard his name first, but I will keep you in mind, Councillor Chang. GG 18.22, Metro Hall, 55 John Street, non-competitive contract, and Siemens Canada Limited for building automation system upgrades. Moved by Councillor Burnside. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.23, non-competitive contract with various suppliers for the supply of proprietary parts and maintenance services at various wastewater and water treatment plants for Toronto Water. Moved by Councillor Mantas. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.24, amendment to purchase order number 6047137 with North Tunnel Constructors ULC for the construction of the Coxwell Bypass Tunnel between Ashbridges Bay Treatment Plant and the Coxwell Ravine Park. You have questions, Councillor Holiday?
Chair,
Okay.
if I may advise as well, due to the confidential attachment, we may need to go in camera for those questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
and we'll do in camera at the end. GG 18.25, non-competitive contract with Esri Canada Limited for proprietary geographic information system software licenses, cloud subscriptions, and related maintenance. And there's a confidential with this as well. Any holds? Moved by Councillor Mantas. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.26, non-competitive procurement with Computacenter TerraMac Technologies Incorporated for changing management consultant services for the Housing Secretariat. Moved by Councillor Crisanti. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.27, 26 Gerrard Street East, designation of the property used by Toronto Shelter and Support Services as a municipal capital facility. Any holds? Moved by Councillor Chang. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.28, 50 Richmond Street East, nominal lease agreement with the Unity Health Toronto. Want a recorded vote, Councillor Holiday? Okay. Matthew?
So if you could just call the vote and
All right, I'm gonna, all in favor of GG 18.28, 50 Richmond Street East, nominal lease agreement with Unity Health Toronto. All in favor? Councillor Ainsley, Councillor Crisanti, Councillor Mantas, Councillor Chang. Opposed? Councillor Burnside, Councillor Holiday, and that passes. GG 18.29, amendment to Toronto Municipal Code, Chapter 217, Records Corporate. Moved by Councillor Burnside. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.30, amendment to the bylaw governing the city-sponsored pension plan, Toronto Fire Department, superannuation, and benefit fund. Moved by Councillor Holiday. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.31, 33 Queen Street East, Toronto Parking Authority settlement proposal with Dakin West Incorporated, and this comes with a confidential attachment. Any holds? Can I have a mover? Councillor Crisanti. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.32, 101 Cedarvale Avenue, Car Park number 20, future D designation as a municipal parking facility, Toronto Transit Commission's Line 2 Capacity Enhancement Program. Any holds? Moved by Councillor Mantas. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.33, Occupational Health and Safety Report for the end of year 2023. Moved by Councillor Burnside. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.34, 2022 to 2023 Annual Human Rights Office Request. Oh, sorry, we have a speaker. I will hold that down. GG 18.35, non-union separation costs for 2023. Moved by Councillor Crisanti. All in favor? That carries. GG 18.36, 2023 update on fire and life safety compliance at the City of Toronto. We have a speaker? Oh, so we do. You split the page on. All right, we have a speaker on that item. I'm going to hold that down. GG 18.37, status of the iOS airdrop functionality on city devices. I'm going to hold that. I'm going to defer to the next meeting. GG 18.3A, expropriation of business improvement area land, and potential compensation.
This you want to move the others.
Oh, sorry, and I'm gonna move this without recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, you're opposed. That passes. GG 18.39, temporary suspension of Drawn Ontario Incorporated, and we have 3 speakers on that, so I will hold that down.
That's the end of this list.
And we are done vetting the agenda. We are going to go back to GG 18.1, apportionment of property taxes as of November 20th, 2024 for hearing. We have 1 registered speaker, Richard Sadowski, who is doing it by video conference. Is Mr. Sadowski online? Good morning, Mr. Sadowski. Can you hear us? Mr. Sadowski, could you unmute, please?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, I didn't realize you'd given me that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Mr. Sadowski, could you turn up your volume?
Is that better?
Sorry, Mr. Sadowski, we're having a lot of trouble hearing you.
Okay, I can hear you well. You can't hear me?
It's better.
I'll try to move closer to the...
That's even better. You have 5
Okay.
minutes to address the committee whenever you're ready.
Okay, in light of all of the language that you used, Mr. Chair, do you need another sip of coffee?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Mr. Chairman and councillors, thank you. My name is Richard Sadowski. I'm addressing you both as a resident of 621 Shepherd Avenue East and as the president of the Condominium Corporation 2757. It's my hope that I'll be able to provide any additional information to the more than 200 owners in the building following today's hearing. For your information, I've spoken with various departments of the city, very helpful. Talked to a number of our owners and also been in touch with the law firm that represented the developer of the project. As you are aware, all owners were provided with notices from the city, essentially putting us on notice that property taxes were due for 2019 and 2020. This came as a surprise because it was our understanding that our statement of adjustments reflected holdbacks, essentially monies held in trust by the builder, designated for these same property taxes. After speaking with the developer's legal firm, I was told that the city received a sum of money July of 2020 that was deemed to have satisfied this debt. I understand that the purpose of today may not be to go into the funding formula. However, it's my understanding that the committee is going to vote on whose shoulders the debt will land. I find that this difficult because if we as owners and you as a committee don't know the exact amount that each owner, or for that matter, even the developer owes, how can you vote as to an apportionment of taxes? That's my submission, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sadowski. Are there any questions of the deputant? Seeing none. Sorry, Mr. Sadowski, I just wanted to ask you, so you're the chair of the condominium board?
I'm the president of the condominium board, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And how old's the building?
5 years.
5 years. And so you were given, individual notices by the city of Toronto that you
Correct.
hadn't paid your taxes, although
Correct.
you paid the taxes to the condo management company or to the builder?
Yes, typically, Mr. Chair, when you're purchasing a home, there is a letter of adjustments, and each the owners had monies that were held back for the taxes to be paid in 2020. Those taxes were paid by the developer, as I understand, July of 2020. The accumulation of all the monies collected from the owners, as well as a top up from the developer. I don't mean to speak for the developer, and that was for the property taxes. I understand from the city, who has been helpful, that there is going to be an adjustment, but I'm still left with trying to understand, after this adjustment is made, how is this committee going to apportion taxes, and to whom is notice going to be provided?
Okay, all right. And sorry, just to be clear, you paid your taxes for the outstanding year to the builder?
Correct,
you
yes. In the
expected them to be paid to
in the statement of adjustments, it's reflected as taxes collected from January 30th, 2020 to December 31st, 2020. And that amount, in my case, it was the amount that the city is seeking from me was the actual holdback that the builder kept, ultimately paying to the city in July of 2020.
Okay, all right, thank you, sir. We're gonna ask some questions to staff. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I have an additional question for the speaker.
Yep, sorry, Councillor Cheng. Councillor Holiday had the floor first, and then you can.
Okay, great. Thank
Councillor
you.
Holiday?
Thank you for speaking to us today, sir. Could you just tell me, since July 2020, has anyone paid taxes since then?
Councillor Holiday, I can only speak in my case, but there have been some owners that have indicated that they have. I personally have paid taxes in 21, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay. So do you know when the builder made a payment in July 2020, was that for the annualized taxes in 2020, or was it, to the best of your understanding, up until that date? And the reason I ask that is because the period covered for some of these goes to the end of 2020, so December 31st, 2020. So I'm just trying to understand that payment, what you know about it, and what happened after that.
So, Councillor, what I understand is it wasn't just for the period ending July 2020, it was for the year.
Okay. And then in 2021, did the tax process follow the normal cycle?
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Holiday, Councillor Cheng, questions of the deputant? Can't hear you, Councillor Cheng.
Sorry about that. I was just wondering what happened in terms of taxes for 2019?
2019, it appears that the city is satisfied. So, Councillor, the taxes that we were advised about form two different areas, one for the actual unit that we occupy and one for the property. The taxes that the city was looking for was the property amount for 2019. And I understand from the city that they're satisfied that all of those numbers, all of those amounts owed by the owners at 621 Shepherd are not being sought, that the city has been made whole.
So the holdback that happened with the developer covered 2019, but there's a gap in terms of what was paid and what the city is asking for 2020. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can only tell you in my own personal case, the amount that the city is seeking reflects the entire amount that was held back in my statement of adjustments in my personal unit. They are corresponding amounts. So the legal firm holds it back on the statement of adjustment. The builder has these funds, and the builder ultimately is responsible for paying them, as I'm told that they did.
So the builder has said the entire amount has already been given to the city, but the city is saying that money has not been received?
Yeah, I'm really confused because the builder clearly is not here. So the builder is the one that was presented with this bill, ultimately saying we're the wrong ones. We have paid all that we owe, and so the city has sought to come to not come after, but to send notices out to 200 owners who were a little surprised that they were each being asked for several thousands of dollars.
And is every owner clear on their specific amount
They're clear on
that
their
is being
specific amount, but I can't speak to them, and this is part of my report back to them, to say that they need to look at their own statement of adjustments. But of the more than 15 or 20, not a large sample, but 10% of the building, in every case, their own statement of adjustments reflected a payment held back by the builder, the developer, to be paid for the taxes that formed part of the amount that was paid in July 2020. So I think that the developer doesn't feel they're not here, and they're the ones served with the bill initially. I gather they feel that it's not on their shoulders, and if anything, that the argument might be with the city and it's not the builder's responsibility to act on behalf of the 200 owners. They're gone.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we look forward to hearing from staff about what's
Yeah.
happening here. But thank you for being here to make this deputation.
Thank you. As you understand, my dilemma personally and on behalf of is, and there is a provision I've read in the notices that we got that simply says that the approved property taxes, if you folks end up passing this, subject to adjustments by the city, and there are further amounts though that we're all receiving, there is, I gather, an appeals process, and maybe that's where this all ends up going if there are still monies owed to each of the 200 owners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cheng. Councillor Holiday, questions of the deputant? You're done? Oh, sorry. Okay. Anybody else have questions of the deputant? Seeing none, we're going to move to questions of staff. Anybody have questions of staff? Sorry, Councillor Cheng.
Thank you. I wonder if staff can speak to this discrepancy described by the deputant.
Through the chair, the payments that the deputant had indicated in his statement will be applied to the accounts once the apportionment has been approved by the committee.
I think that what the deputant is saying is that the developer has held back this amount and applied it already in July of 2020. So it is my understanding that the residents feel this amount was already paid. So what is the miscommunication here? Or did the developer hold back monies that were never transferred to the city?
Through the chair, the city is not party to the agreement between the builder and the residents of the building. Therefore, I cannot comment if the builder estimated correctly in the amount of money to be retrieved by the residents. As it stands right now, the account is in arrears. Taxes run with the land. And collection efforts have been exhausted on this property. Therefore, we're bringing it forward for apportionment.
And will there be late fees applied as well?
No, once the apportionment has been, through the chair, once the apportionment has been approved by the committee, all interest and penalties will be waived.
So can the city speak to whether or not monies were received by the developer as described by the deputant?
Through the chair, I can confirm that for 2019, payment was received in full. For 2020, partial payment was received. We have also been advising residents that one option that they have is to contact their title insurance company, as they may be able to, any arrears that are outstanding on their account, they may be able to file a claim with their title insurance company for those funds.
So the developer potentially covered the unit portion of the tax, but not the property.
I can't speak to the amount. I don't have the amount in front of me, but a partial payment was received.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cheng. Councillor Holiday, questions?
Thanks, Chair, to staff. And if you don't mind, if you could just get the microphone a little closer because it's hard to hear. So in this report, there looks to be a partial tax year in 2019. It looks to be, it varies, but it looks to be around the end of September or October 2019 to the end of 2019. And then generally for some of the units into 2020, if I scroll through the page, 01/01/20 to 31/12/20.
Through the chair, that's
Can
correct.
you, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, I confirm those dates.
Okay, so we're talking about part of 2019 and all of 2020 generally for the units that are covered. In 2021, has the taxes been apportioned? Has the accounts been set up? Have you been receiving tax money as you would traditionally have?
Through the chair, I can confirm that the assessment, Municipal Property Assessment Corporation has assigned individual roll numbers to each unit in the building, and property taxes have been issued to those residents.
Okay, so 2021 is not a matter of concern for this committee, and I don't think the deputant brought it up. So back to the partial payment. Do I understand this correctly? If committee passes this report, you will actually create the tax bills and the tax accounts for 2019 and 2020 as described?
Through the chair, that's correct.
They don't exist today.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, so you received a payment from someone, presumably the builder, developer, whoever it was, for the taxes in 2019. Have you applied that payment to anything, or is it just sitting?
Through the chair, the payment is sitting. The report is to request the authority to transfer to the individual accounts.
Do you know if the payment that you received for 2019 covers all of the taxes you've laid out in this report?
Through the chair, yes, I can confirm that the payment received will pay for 2019 taxation year.
Okay, so whatever paperwork the residents get back, they're not likely to be asked for money for 2019.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, over to 2020. In terms of the payments that you have received, does that cover all of the 2020 bills?
Through the chair, no, it does not.
And is there a break point or some understanding that we have a point in time that it covers?
Through the chair, no, I do not have a time frame.
Okay, so you have some amount of balance that you can apply to the 2020 bills, and there'll be some leftover balance for the property owners to pay.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Do we know, is it most of the costs are covered or a little bit of the costs? Do we have any sense, order of magnitude?
I don't have an exact range to provide the committee.
Okay, but the effect of passing this is that people will receive bills for 2020, and there presumably will be some credit applied to it.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions, Chair. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you, Councillor Holiday. Other questions of staff? Speakers on this item? Any speakers? Can I have somebody move the recommendation in the report?
I'll speak briefly. I just
Councillor
want
Cheng?
to, yeah. So I want to thank the deputant for coming, and it seems that there is a gap in understanding between their developer and themselves. And And I think our staff have suggested looking into the insurance available to see if that is something that they can get covered. But it seems to me that the resolution for this, for the residents, is not with the city, but with the developer. So I hope that they're able to find a remedy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chang. Sorry, are you moving the report?
Yes, I'll move the report.
Okay, recommendations moved by Councillor Chang. All in favor? That carries. Our next item is GG 18.2, cancellation, reduction, or refund of property taxes or payment in lieu of taxes as of November 20th, 2024. We have one registered speaker, Richard Bolas of Sign and Build Incorporated, who is speaking by video conference. Oh, good morning, sir. Sorry, I have video conference on my sheet in front of me. Good morning. You have 5 minutes to address the committee whenever you're ready.
Sure. The matter presented today involves MPAC and the city jointly and pertains to the property located at 2080, 2082 Queen Street East in Toronto. So the city had one of the property tax bills for the subject property accidentally addressed to the neighboring property for the last few years. Since the owner unknowingly received one of the property tax bills associated with the property while the other was sent to the neighboring property who shared the same tenant. In December of 2023, the city corrected the billing and addressed the error and assigned the second tax bill for the property to the correct owner, Cinebuild Inc. Upon receipt of the bill, Cinebuild has been in correspondence with the city and MPAC concerning the accuracy of the billing, as the new combined property value was unusually elevated versus similar property in the node. An aggregate, sorry, we'll skip that. So as a result, request for reconsideration was filed with MPAC for 2024, where they uncovered and formally acknowledged a material error with respect to the measurement of the property. And this resulted in a reduction to the property value of 18.8% and lowered the total property value for the tax years 2024 and upcoming 2025. The MPAC minutes of settlement have since been processed with the city for 2024 and a refund is expected shortly. The issue is for the tax years 2021, 2022, and 2023, the city has retroactively billed the owner in the amount of $72,292, which has been paid in full as of the end of October. So today we are respectfully asking that the total amount billed for 2021, 2022, and 2023 be reduced in line with the MPAC reduction of value of 18.8% that was already applied to 2024 and 2025. Given that the city's billing was retroactive, we were not able to file a request for reconsideration with MPAC for these years. So we cannot formally file the RFR with MPAC for retroactive billing. And there were two major errors that led us down this path. First, the city accidentally sent the tax bill to the wrong owner. And second, MPAC entered the wrong measurement for the property area, which resulted in a value that was 18.8% higher than it should have been. So that's the issue.
Okay, thank you, sir. Questions of the deputy? Everybody's good. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate your presentation this morning. We'll bring it into committee. Questions of staff? Councillor Holiday.
Thanks, Chair. My question is there any way that the owner can address this?
Through the chair, I understand Mr. Balut's issue. In accordance to the Assessment Review Board's rules of practice and procedure, there is an option for Mr. Balut's to pursue a request to file a late appeal. I can provide Mr. Balut's with the contact information with the Assessment Review Board, and he can inquire into the necessary steps for the board to consider his late appeal.
My follow-up question is, if there's an adjustment that's processed with MPAC concerning the value of the property, any adjustments to the tax account that occur, do they show up in a report to this committee, or are they done through the staff process?
So Through the chair, the reason for the difference in the CVAs between the tax years is due to the provision in which the relief was sought. City of Toronto Act, in a gross and manifest error, is an error in the preparation of the assessment roll that is clerical or factual in nature, but not an error in judgment in assessing the property. A request for reconsideration is through the Assessment Act. Within the request for reconsideration, it opens the current value for a full review. MPAC will look at the property using standard valuation methods and make any necessary adjustments for factual issues. However, they must also check to make sure that the value is fair compared to similar properties in the area. This specific provision provides MPAC the authority to make an adjustment based on a range of fairness with similar properties. This provision is not permitted within tax applications in the City of Toronto Act, in which this report is regarding.
So where does the property owner go next? To MPAC or to the city?
Through the chair, the suggestion is the property owner go to the Assessment Review Board and request consideration for filing a late Section 40 appeal so that the assessment can be looked in its entirety.
So this is an awkward place to sort of ask and answer these questions for a speaker because they can't, but if they wanted to speak to somebody at the city to try to outline the process and the recommendation, what's their best way to connect, I guess from a customer service perspective?
Mr. Belutz can contact Revenue Services, myself or my staff. I believe we've been in contact with Mr. Belutz on a number of occasions. He is free to contact anybody from our department.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Holiday. Other questions of staff on this item? Seeing none, speakers? Can I have somebody move the recommendations? Oh, sorry, there's an amendment before us as well. Sure. Can I have somebody move the amendment? Moved by Councillor Crisanti. All in favor? Item is amended. All in favor? That carries. And our next item, sorry, and I'm just going to remind everybody, members of the public, I'm going to go through the agenda and do items that have registered speakers, and then we'll go back to the ones held by committee members. So our next one is GG 18.4, award of document 455-392-8310 to GFL Environmental Incorporated for curbside collection services in District 2 for solid waste management services. I have one registered speaker, Patrick Dovici of GFL Environment Incorporated. Morning, sir. You have 5 minutes to address the committee whenever you're ready.
Good morning. I thought it was obviously important that I attended myself as sort of being the founder and CEO of GFL Environmental. This City of Toronto contract that is currently up for rebid was a contract that was, near and dear to my heart back in 2010 and 2011 when the original outsourcing of the District 2 contract happened. Obviously, at that time, GFL was a much smaller company than it currently is today. GFL today is a company that, spans all 10 provinces in Canada and 26 states in the US and approaching about $8 billion a year in revenue. Currently, we service in this District 2 contract 165,000 homes. And across the company today, we're servicing over 8 million households on a weekly basis. I think from our perspective, we're not here to debate the merits of whether insourcing or outsourcing or union versus non-union. Today, GFL has 25,000 employees, and that's a combination of union and non-union employees. The beautiful part about living in Canada is being part of a union is the employee's choice today, and we have a combination of both union and non-union employees throughout the organization. But really, I just wanted to come here and answer any specific questions that anyone may have had for me as sort of being the founder and Toronto being home for me. There's not any other contract within our portfolio that's more important than this one. This was a contract that, I think was a very big turning point in GFL's founding. And I think where we sit today, I'm just here to express you have my commitment as the founder and CEO of the company to continue doing what we've done for the last 13 years, continue working as a great community partner, and moving this contract forward is helpful. I think from our perspective, one thing to consider is that we have reserved build slots for these trucks when we were given a letter by procurement. But given the constant delays, we are getting sort of very close to deadline of where we have to commit to these 100+ new trucks for this contract. And anything we can do to help sort of push that along or have council make a decision on this would be helpful for us as an organization. I will say we've complied with fair wage for the last 13 years, and we haven't had one liquidated damage over the last 13 years in servicing this contract, which I think is, important stat. And from a service level perspective, I think both ourselves and the workers from the city in D3 and D4 have elevated the service levels since the outsourcing of this contract. And I'm sort of just here to answer any questions that anyone may have, but that's all I have to say. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Questions of the deputant? Councillor Holladay?
Thank you for speaking to us today. Can you tell me a little bit about the collection industry? Do a lot of municipalities insource or outsource? Do a lot of municipalities rely on providers such as yourself? What does it look like, at least in Canada?
In Canada, I would say the lion's share of municipalities are outsourced. There are a few situations where it's similar to the City of Toronto, where there is a hybrid model. So if you look at, big municipalities such as Hamilton, Windsor to a certain extent, in Calgary, and a small amount in Edmonton would be a hybrid model. But the lion's share of most collection contracts for municipalities are outsourced to the private sector.
So I don't expect you to give away trade secrets or competitive advantage, but when a company such as yours that you work for or another company is considering a bid to work with a municipality, what are the things they think about when they see the public solicitation document? What are the decisions that you go through in arriving at what you put back?
I think it's from an asset positioning perspective as well, what assets you have in a specific market and what assets you can utilize to operate the contract efficiently. And it's an allocation of capital discussion. These contracts require a significant amount of capital. And it's a question of, do you want to put capital to work in a specific market, in a specific region? And I think, given that Toronto is home for us, this is a market that's very important to us. We pass on a lot of other municipal opportunities, but Toronto's been one that's been sort of near and dear to our heart.
Can you tell me a little bit more about capital allocation? So in other words, you're deciding whether to buy equipment? Is that
exactly?
That
I mean, if you think about some of the larger companies, they have operations across the entire country in Canada and the US. And, we can only spend so many dollars on capital in a specific year. So this is a very large contract, large capital, so there'll be other areas where we have to pass on opportunities just for the simple fact that, there's only so many dollars to go around at a specific time.
What are the type of assets that you employ for this? Obviously garbage collection trucks, but could you tell me a little bit more about the asset space?
Yeah, so if you think about where these trucks are coming back to, you have a very large maintenance facility. So if you think about industrial land in Toronto today, industrial land in Toronto is anywhere between 4 and 5 million an acre. To house 85 trucks and have a maintenance facility, lockers, bathrooms, staff, etc. Today you probably need somewhere between a 5 and a 6 acre site. Plus you need the infrastructure. We use compressed natural gas vehicles as part of this new bid. So we have to build a compressed natural gas fueling station at our facility, which is a year plus build out. So all those together, then plus, the training, staffing, resources internally to manage. We have 200 employees on this contract in District 2. So again, the resources, the training facilities, et cetera, to go into that.
So you're bringing capital and you're bringing workers to do the work within the vicinity of your area, within the 416, within our city.
Correct.
What are the other things that you have to think about as a service provider to deliver the service? Do we ask you for benchmarks or performance standards? Are you allowed to exceed them? What happens if you don't meet them?
I think we've consistently exceeded the expectations that were laid out in the original contract when the original outsourcing happened. I think if you go back and bench with staff about where we've again, time to complete, missed pickups, et cetera, customer service related issues. I think, across both District 3, District 4, District 1, District 2, as you know, we currently do Etobicoke, and we currently do the multi-res units as well under separate contracts. But I think all levels of service have increased, going back from 2010 after the sort of original outsourcing, and we've all been keeping ourselves to a higher standard, I believe.
So, clearly the most basic function is that you travel a truck through routes and that operator picks up the waste and you deliver it to another place. At the most basic level, that's what you're doing. What are the other things that, if I'm a counselor looking at what it is you do, that I would judge you on? So, getting the pickup done on the day is clearly the basic. What are the other things I have to think about? What does the contract ask you to do?
I mean, the contract basically specifies we have to pick up X amount of homes in a specific day. Obviously, there's all kinds of standards for our drivers that they need to meet and the behavior of an existing driver. I think under the new contract, environmentally friendlier vehicles versus, under the existing contract, they're diesel trucks. Under the new contract, we propose to go to compressed natural gas, just burning cleaner fuel, obviously. So I think, all of those things, I think, when you think about these contracts, especially in District 2, District 2 is probably the hardest collection zone in the city of Toronto. A lot of one-way streets, a lot of cars parked on the street that switch sides depending on the day of the week, depending on the time of the year. Again, when you think about collecting on certain streets downtown, what time are you actually allowed to park on the street? So we have to collect on those streets before cars are parked on the street, so we're not lugging bins between different vehicles, et cetera. So again, we've done it very successfully. I think from a disruption perspective, obviously, moving forward with a company like GFL, who's done it for the last 13 years, I think from a disruption perspective as a counselor, you would probably have significantly less issues than trying to switch to a new provider today. But, those are all the things that sort of go into it.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Holiday. And sorry, just to remind everybody, we can ask questions in public about solid waste collection in general, but not into the parameters of the contract in public because it hasn't been awarded yet. Other questions of the deputant? Councillor Cheng?
Great, thank you so much through the speaker. So I just have some questions about the impact of the landfill sites of GFL. I read here in an article on Local TO that there have been at least 14 fires and 1 explosion in sites between 2020 and 2023 at a rate of almost 1 every month. These include on August 2022, a blaze at a recycling facility in Edmonton that lasted 20 hours. And further, in 2021, the Auditor General of Ontario's reported hazardous spills and that GFL is the only waste management company on the Auditor General's report list of 30 most frequent spillers, with 78 reported spills between 2016 and 2020. And they point out that GFL as an example of how Ontario's environment
Sorry, Councillor, do you have a
ministry-
question?
Yes, I do.
Because you're a minute
allows
and you're
companies-
5.
Yeah, companies to continue operating despite these growing offenses. And I just, there's some concerns about the environmental impact of your operation.
Sorry, Councillor, do you have a question?
Just wondering.
It's not
if you
speaking
could
time, it's
speak to
question.
Yes, if you could speak to these allegations and how how our waste impacts the greater environment as it leaves our city.
Yeah, I think we operate under the law, and we have every operating permit and be able to execute this contract, and none of our permits have been revoked. We report all of these incidents as they happen. I don't think it's uncommon for fires to happen at a landfill or a recycling facility. Obviously, with the size and scale of the business we have in Ontario, by and far the largest in this province, that might get reported more frequently because of the size and the amount of actual revenue we do in this province. But I can tell you, we have no issues with our operating permits. We have no issues with the Ministry of Environment, et cetera. We have all permits and have never been in a position where a license has been suspended or revoked. So That's what I can say.
And was there a $130,000 fine by the ministry under the Environmental Protections Act in May?
I could get back to you. I can't confirm that.
Okay. And my last question is, there is in 2010 or 2011, when we started working with GFL, when the city started working with GFL, the Auditor General showed a savings for the city of 10 to 11 million. And that was something I think that people found encouraging in terms of privatization. And now those cost savings are no longer true. And I wonder if you could speak to that. So, why should the city continue to privatize if we're actually not saving any money?
I can't speak to that. That's a decision that council and staff have to make. Yeah, we just responded to an RFQ that was issued for these services, and it's up to council and staff to determine whether you should insource or outsource.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cheng. Other questions of the deputant? Seeing none, thank you very much, sir. We'll take it into committee. Questions of staff on this item? No questions of staff? Councillor Burnside? Okay. All right. So we will.
Chair, I have one question for staff.
Okay, Councillor Mantos.
To staff, were all steps taken for the procurement process to be fulfilled and for the requirements of the process to be fulfilled? And why are we bringing back this item today?
Through the chair to council, yes, all steps in the procurement process were taken, and it's back at committee today due to council direction at the previous council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Holiday, questions of staff?
Yeah, it's a basic one. Is there a term sheet available with respect to this agreement? I realize legal agreements are long and complex things, but is there a simple way for me to see the deliverables that the provider offers? And is that something that's still a confidential item, given the status of this report?
Through the chair to council, the term sheets, the terms are all included within the RFP. I'd have to pass that over to Genevieve if there's any additional information that could be shared on that.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Holiday. Councillor Burnside, questions of staff? Okay, Councillor Cheng.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'm just wondering what kind of requirements were set out in the contract in terms of what service delivery requirements?
Through the chair to the councillor, there are approximately 18 to 20 requirements in terms of service provision. So ensuring that the CVORs are up to date, that the houses are collected, or the materials are collected from the homes on time, that the trucks are tipping at the appropriate times, that staff have all the appropriate health and safety training. So there's around 20 items on the liquidated damages sheet for that is monitored very closely throughout this contract and all contracts within the division. In addition, some of the other requirements from the previous contract are the side guard requirements on the fleet. And as Mr. DeVigi did mention, compressed natural gas is now being used in those vehicles under this contract, which again aligns to Transform TO targets and ensuring that the fleet that we use and contract out is the most sustainable that we can get at any given time.
When we're considering our potential contracts, do we examine environmental practices of organizations, especially pertaining to the resulting landfills and how they're managed?
Through the chair to committee, Councillor, we look at, we do a jurisdictional scan of best practices as it relates to the specific contract. So again, back to looking at side guards, making sure that that's in the agreement, looking at compressed natural gas versus diesel, leaning that way, and then also on contract management in terms of including additional parameters and requirements in our liquidated damages forms. So we do that. We do make sure that we look very closely at the line of business that is being done by the industry, but there is no review beyond that at other lines of businesses for bidders when they submit their bid on a specific piece of work. And perhaps if there's additional follow-up questions, I could pass that to Genevieve to provide more context on it.
It's my understanding that this was an RFQ and not an RFP, and therefore the main determining factor is the financial piece, so who bid the lowest, versus an RFP where we might have other requirements and analysis of other factors. And I'm just wondering why, especially in something that's quite environmentally sensitive, waste management is complex and can have far-reaching consequences. Why would we choose an RFQ and not an RFP for this?
So through the chair to the councillor, we utilize the RFQ method because the work is very standardized across the collection industry. And as staff, as I mentioned, we do our jurisdictional scan to embed those best practices in the RFP as requirements versus allowing companies to bid and maybe not meet those requirements. We're very strict on that approach. So it's definitely something, if council directed us to look at having a different procurement process in the future, we're open to that. But again, we do our due diligence and embed that into the document so that the bidders meet those requirements before we even look at the price.
So just, referring back to this article in the local, it talks about landfills in the US in particular, in poor neighborhoods where local residents who are living in poverty are have really lost their quality of life and have difficulties. And in our procurement process, do we consider at large the behaviors of large organizations? For example, we wouldn't want to procure computers where we know child slavery is being engaged
Sorry,
in
Councillor
that.
Chang.
So just wondering,
Sorry,
are
Councillor.
those things that we...
Councillor,
Yes?
sorry, you're
Yeah.
straying away from the topic at hand.
Well, I'm just wondering how we assess when we're choosing our partner organizations, if we look at the large, their policies and choices and how they impact things that are important to the city, such as net zero and I think social procurement policies.
So I'll start, Councillor, and then pass it over to Genevieve. So we look at what is required to deliver the service within the city. And again, if there's any challenges with that organization from the city's context of previous service delivery, et cetera. In terms of a broader city procurement review of other external items with regards to potential bidders, I'd have to pass that over to Genevieve to address if that's part of our overall procurement process. Genevieve?
I'm going to, through the chair, I'm going to say I apologize, I missed the question. I can tell you that, again, I think as we've previously discussed, in an RFQ, we only do evaluate from a compliance perspective. There's no above and beyond. In an RFP, we can evaluate more from the social side and the sustainable side on what their practices are and how they deliver their services. So that is something that can be encompassed. But again, I apologize, I might have missed the meat of the question.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Yep, sorry, and I'm just going to check. Councillor Burnside, you're good? Okay, Councillor Holiday, sorry, Councillor Crisanti, you have questions? Well, Councillor Holiday wants a second round. But you haven't had your first round yet, so go ahead. Is your microphone on?
Here it is. I'm on now. No, I just wanted to clarify exactly what we're approving here. From what I understand, this is a 5-year agreement commencing on August 3rd, 2026. So we need all this lead time. I believe I heard the answer when the deputy came up, but could you clarify why we need about a year and a half of lead time?
Through the chair to the councillor, yes, we do need quite a bit of lead time in order to order the trucks that are required to do this work.
In order to ensure that they have all the equipment they need to commence this work and complete it, correct?
Through the chair, I'm just going to confirm. So there are requirements within the RFQ that any proponent would need to deliver on. So again, when we are going out for RFQ, we want to ensure we are in an open, competitive space, which means any proponent would need to be able to meet these requirements at time of commencement. In this instance, the recommendation is the incumbent. But again, this is an open competition, which means if it had not been an incumbent, they would have needed the lead time to ensure that they were up and ready for the start date. So that's why we need the lead time.
All right. And the total value of this contract is $289 net of HST?
Through the chair, that's correct.
And that's for the 5-year. Now, given that it's still a year and a half out before it even starts, does that factor in any potential inflationary costs or other increases, or is there going to be some adjustments or amendments that are going to be required because we're making commitments early on today?
Through the chair, there are no adjustments or commitments required on this contract when it starts in 2026.
All right, so we're not going to get any surprises later on. Does this amount going to be the total amount then from start to finish? There's no other amount that is required in this particular tender to complete the project, to complete the removal of garbage and disposal and all of that? Is there anything else or is this all inclusive?
So through the chair to the councillor, this is all inclusive of waste collection only. So the materials under this contract and the previous contracts are moved by the vendor to a city-run and owned transfer station that then moves the materials to the appropriate locations, either the landfill, to a recycling facility, organics facility, et cetera. So this is for the curbside collection of waste only.
And so what about the second half of that, the disposal of that? They collect it and then where? And so who looks after that portion of the contract?
So through the chair to the councillor, there is no contract for the transfer of materials. That is moved, the materials that are collected under this contract and in District 3 and 4 by city staff is taken to a city-owned, operated, and run transfer station. The materials are then moved either by staff on 18-wheelers, or we have other contracts to move materials on those larger trucks to their final destination, whether that's the city-owned and operated landfill, which is operated under contract, or our organics facilities, which are owned by the city, or the material recovery facility, also known as a recycling facility, which is under contract with Circular Materials Ontario.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Crisanti. Councillor Holiday, you want a second round of questions?
Please, Mr. Chair.
Go right ahead. Or go ahead.
Yep, thank you. And what I really am trying to do is get at exactly what's in front of us. I just want to confirm the RFQ document is a public document, is it not? It's not confidential.
That's correct.
The contract could be confidential until council approves it, so I won't ask you to answer anything that's confidential. could you tell me what did the proponent bid on? Like, what did they submit to the city? Is it a price per ton?
Correct.
Okay. And so I had a peek at the sheet, but there's a couple of categories, right? Solid, like yard waste, garbage, that sort of, so they submit 4 per ton prices, is that right?
They submit a price on garbage, organics, and oversized material, which is one price.
Yep.
A price on recyclable collection, a price on seasonal yard waste collection. So there's a number of additional components of work where either an hourly rate or a per ton rate are included.
Let's put that aside. So I think there was 4 categories of per ton rate that they submit. The city gives them an estimate on how many tons it's going to be involved, and you multiply that out and you get a gross number, which adds up to 289 million or something like that. And there's also a piece in there that for special occurrences, you've got an hourly rate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so could you give us an example of what a special occurrence would be?
So if there's flooding or some storm issues and we need to collect additional material, we have that as a contingency. In that case, when we're looking at our districts 3 and districts 4, we have internal staff we can redeploy to do that work in those areas.
Again, back to what's before us and how it got here. Is it fair to say the RFQ is rather straightforward? You give a map or you specify an area for bidders to look at. They got to figure out all the streets on it. Do you not give them the number of bins even that exist in that area so they know all the collection points?
Through the chair, I believe we give bin numbers and house counts, et cetera, to work into estimates. But as you did allude to, it does vary based on the amount of material that goes out in a given year. So the price can fluctuate slightly up or slightly down, and it is based on our long-term estimates of material.
And it doesn't really change. The collection points don't change. The amount of material citizens put into the bins can change, but you give the bidders some sense of what it is. It's not like people are going to stop throwing stuff out.
Through the chair, that's correct. There may be some additions of single-family homes if they're built. Generally, the trend is single-family homes being removed from the system in lieu of larger buildings. But again, when it's on a per-ton basis, it's weighed at our transfer station, and that's how our bills are generated.
So in addition to them figuring out, okay, I need this many trucks to make this number of stops, you also tell them that they must pick up between certain hours on certain days, and then they have to take the truck back and dump it at a transfer station, but that's not theirs. They just have to dump the truck on time, right? I just want to make sure I understand what we're asking them to do. And then if there's a whole checklist of things that their equipment must comply to, is that fair to say? Like that's a requirement? Their trucks need to be certain ways. What happens if they make a mistake or they don't do things right?
So through the chair to the councillor, there's provisions for liquidated damages, of course, but we generally tend to work very closely with our contractors to educate as much as we can if there's some minor mistakes, and then move more progressively to liquidated damages, and all those fees or the amounts are included within the RFQ documents.
They didn't tell you what they were going to do for liquidated damages. You told them.
That's correct.
So if I don't know, pick something here. If the pickup is late, you can charge the contractor money.
That's correct.
If they pick up garbage at 6:01, theoretically, you could charge them a fee, a liquidated damage. Sorry, I should use the right word, a liquidated damage. It's not a fee, but it's a number. Is there anything else in the contract? Like, so you give them area, you give them number of houses, you give them a bunch of specifications, you tell them when to pick it up, you tell them a bunch of rules about their equipment. Anything else? Any other ingredient into this?
Health and safety requirements, CVOR ratings, et cetera, but generally, what you've mentioned, Councillor, include.
And if they stray from any of that, liquidated damages?
Correct.
Okay, and then they feed into this process a per ton rate. You multiply it out for your report, an estimate to give us an order of magnitude, and we have to understand that if people throw out a little more, it's going to cost a little more. If they throw out a little bit less, it's going to cost a little bit less. But people are people, and it's pretty reasonable to predict.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holiday. Anybody else in the second round that wants questions of staff? Seeing none. Speakers. No. Did you want to go on camera? Okay. Speakers on this item? Councillor Cheng?
I have a motion. So this is there is an upcoming report that is coming to Infrastructure and Environment, and we would like included feasibility of a managed competition for the next procurement of waste collection, a procurement strategy that considers supplier performance and sustainability practices in alignment with Transform TO, the city's sustainability objectives, including reaching net zero by 2040, and evaluation criteria that can be included regarding sustainable practices, regulatory compliance of proponents, as well a critical path with the procurement timeline, especially in light of the necessary infrastructure, procurement of trucks and truck storage capacity that is necessary. So we have here a contract that we have to move forward with. We've heard about the trucks that are waiting to be procured and the timeline and capacity that will impact. But we also understand that when we first privatized waste, half of the city's waste management, there was a savings to the city, which is no longer the case. And the wage differential for city workers are paid $31.24 per hour. GFL staff are paid $23.91 per hour, and that does not include fringe benefits for either. So we're comparing apples to apples here. So then the question is, what is the benefit?
Sorry, Councillor Cheng, just a moment. I have a point of order from Councillor Holiday. Councillor Holiday, point of order.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to raise a point of order. This is an award of contract, and the motion speaks to something a little different. And I think this may be out of order. Could you rule on that?
Yep. So my understanding of this, the way that the motion is worded, and that this is ultimately going to council for approval, because the way the motion is worded, recommending that council look at this, that it's legitimately before us. Okay. All right. Councillor Cheng, if you want to continue.
Thank you. So I just think it's really important that we look at the big picture when we're getting into partnerships. And I know that the city is going to consider bringing it back in-house, but either way, whether we want to consider other partners or bringing it back, that critical path towards building the infrastructure necessary, it can't be created overnight. So no matter what the timeline, because if we don't do it with sufficient time, we will reach the end of this 5-year contract and we will be in the same situation. We won't be able to consider other options because the infrastructure won't be there to transition to something else. So this motion is just mapping out a critical path and considering a wider lens of how we procure our waste management partners. And I think the ethical and environmental practices of an organization are important. So yes, we want really good service delivery in our city, and we have great metrics for that. But the wider lens of how a company is doing in terms of environmental compliance, because our waste does leave our city, and its impact is not just on Torontonians. So I think that we just have to have the responsibility to look at that bigger picture. And so this motion is just adding to work that's already being done that will go to infrastructure and environment to plan our next pathway for how we may consider moving forward with regard to waste management. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cheng. Councillor Holiday to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I will move the recommendations of the original report. I think that's quite necessary in order to process this item. I am a little surprised at Councillor Cheng's motion being here and now, and I understand lots of conversations happen at different points, but this particular report before us is an award of contract following a procurement process, and it's here before us. And we had a chance to ask questions. We have the report before us. You either accept the report or you don't. And I'll be voting in favor of it. And in particular, because I would like to see continuation of services for this part of the city. I will not support Councillor Cheng's motion. I invite her to work through those processes and those other reports, or speak to them, or talk to staff. But although it's technically in order, I think it's talking about two different things. And so I urge my colleagues to support the report that's before us from the staff, and ensure that there's continuity of services in that part of the city that this applies to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Holyday. Other speakers on this item? Sorry, Councillor Mantas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also agree with Councillor Holyday. I'll be supporting the original recommendations. I also do believe that Councillor Cheng's motion should have been addressed differently, or spoken with the departments to come to their reports when they're going to be coming to our committee or to the infrastructure committee, and it did not need to come today in for this item. So I'll be voting against Councillor Cheng's motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mantas. Other speakers on this item? Seeing none, and I have a motion. I'm moving on behalf of Deputy Mayor Holyday, or sorry, Deputy Mayor McKelvey. My apologies. That City Council direct the General Manager of Solid Waste Management Services to seek Council approval prior to exercising the additional 2 separate 1-year term extensions for the District 2 contract and with GFL Environmental Incorporated. Award pursuant to the request for quotation document 455-392-8310 that would extend the term beyond the initial 5-year period. Okay. Other speakers on this item? Seeing none. Cheng's first. Mine, on behalf of Deputy Mayor Mc. Councillor Holyday's motion goes first. All in favor of Councillor Holyday's motion? Councillor Holyday? We're going to vote? We're voting on your motion. All in favor of Councillor Manson, sorry, Councillor Holyday's motion. All in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. Councillor Cheng's motion. All in favor? Nope. No. All opposed? And that loses. My motion. All in favor? All in favor? Opposed? And that passes. Item is amended. All in favor? And that carries. Sorry, any opposed? Sorry? Yes. Yes. All in favor of the item as amended? Opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Thank you. Our next item is GG 18.34, 2022 to 2023 Annual Human Rights Office Report. We have 2 registered speakers. The first one is Naz Yodali of QP Local 79. Good morning. You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Good morning. Thank you, Councillor Ainsley and committee members for having me speak to you this morning. My name is Nazia Adelahi, President of QP Local 79, where we represent 30,000 workers at the City of Toronto across major divisions. I'm here today to address the 2022-2023 Annual Human Rights Report from the City's Human Rights Office. Before I move on to the serious concerns raised by this report, let me first start by explaining how complaints can come to the HRO from our members and from other unionized workers at the city, and how unionized workers this can negatively impact them. In theory, the HRO was established as an unbiased service created to address human rights complaints as they pertain to the City of Toronto. We have been told numerous times that the HRO attempts to address work issues from a trauma-based perspective. In practice, however, the office can be lacking and its processes are flawed. For years, we have raised issues about the inefficiencies of the HRO and its negative impact on our staff. Workers experiencing discrimination or harassment are often forced into a system that produces no positive outcomes, prolonging their suffering. Even worse, once an HRO complaint is initiated, employees are barred from accessing the union's grievance process until that process is complete, leaving them without the support and representation they would otherwise receive from their union. This delay leaves harmful workplace conditions to persist, further undermining their health and safety. Now to the report at hand. The inability of the office to investigate any of the approximately 2,400 inquiries received over 2 years is a failure of the city's responsibility to uphold human rights and workplace fairness. In the context of workers who have launched a complaint and no longer have access to that process due to severe understaffing of the HRO, that is truly devastating. At the beginning of this calendar year, when we met with the city's People and Equity Division for a routine meeting. In this meeting, we were provided insight into a specialized internal investigation unit, also known as the IIU. We've been seeking clarity about this investigation unit ever since. Over the course of the past year, we learned that the IIU, which exists only to investigate City of Toronto staff, employs former police officers who during their time with the Toronto Police were in charge of investigating for the SIU. We have heard from our members that this unit often employs techniques that we know would be used in a police-style interrogation, throwing papers, banging on tables, and asking repetitive and sometimes aggressive questions. You can imagine just how concerning it is to learn that the HRO has been unable to tackle any new investigations, and that instead the city's People and Equity team is relying on divisions and on potential internal or external investigators like the IIU to resolve human rights complaints. In fact, between March and April of this year, the People and Equity team at the city has filled 3 separate vacancies for investigators in the IIU, which begs the question, if the HRO only has 7 staff and has been unable to take on new investigations, why was the decision made to invest more money in a certain type of investigator with the IIU? This report is deeply concerning to Local 79. Any proposed changes must be developed in consultation with workers and their unions to ensure they're effective and actually trauma-informed. This includes Local 79 and 416. The current risks identified in the report reflect a broken system that needs to prioritize equity, accountability, and the well-being of employees above all else. I also want to reiterate that there is an increased need for accountability and transparency for the People and Equity team at the city in the way that the HRO is managed. Thank you, and we're happy to take questions.
Thank you. Ms. Yodalihi, are there any questions of the speaker? Councillor Burnside.
Thank you. Through you. So you talked about this investigative team of former SIU officers. Yeah. And you mentioned their techniques. Are you alleging that they've done something wrong? And that's the first question. Second question is, you mentioned those are their known techniques, or are you alleging those are the techniques they were using in these complaints?
This is what our workers have experienced. They've experienced aggressive forms of investigation and interrogation is what they've been.
And would you be able to, so I guess the answer is yes? I'm not trying to, it's not a trick question, I'm just trying to understand, like.
Through the chair, the answer is, this is what our members have been experiencing.
Okay, and would that be, like, what kind of percentages are we looking at? Do you have an idea? And if you don't, that's fine too. I'm just trying to understand, like, 'cause you threw a lot of stuff at us, right?
It's not, I wouldn't know the exact percentage. Perhaps that's something that we can look into and we can survey our members to find out what their experience has been, but.
Yeah, because I'm just trying to understand if this is something that's a commonplace technique, or if it might be a technique that is used in extreme circumstances or unique circumstances. I think that might be helpful.
Through the chair, it's been a common experience with the IIU team, very specifically, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Burnside. Are there other questions? I will pass the chair back. I'm going to ask a quick one myself, just to understand a bit more about where Councillor Burnside was going. We okay, Mr. Chair? I'll move over.
Go right ahead.
So start the timer when you're ready.
Thank you, Councillor. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for speaking to us. This is a little bit new, so I want to make sure I understand it. What are the types of circumstances that would involve the IIU, to the best of your understanding?
What we were told was that it would be very specific items, but we were never given clear parameters, and we've asked for clear parameters about what those items may be, what would be passed on to them. In fact, in one discussion, the Human Rights Office is supposed to have a trauma-informed approach to their investigations. But then what we were told was that some cases, arbitrarily or without really set protocols or parameters, were being sent over to the IIU. So I wish I knew the answer. We've been asking for clarity, but we've received none.
Can you give me any examples of the circumstances that would have involved the IIU? I realize you probably can't disclose all the confidential details, but even at the highest level, what are the types of complaints? Is there a pattern to what would draw them into the mix?
That's a city process, and I think that question's probably for city staff.
Okay, fair enough. Is there anything else that you could tell me about the circumstances to help me understand?
Yeah, I mean, I think what is happening is, and this report confirms, that the Human Rights Office is not efficient in addressing the concerns of workplace harassment and anything that's brought forward to the city where there's concerns from workers. When we're looking at over 2,000 cases being missed, what that tells us is that those workers continue to work in those environments without their concerns being addressed. But what it also does is it impedes on the process that the union has available to it through a grievance process. So once a worker brings a complaint forward to their management or their employer, then they are supposed to do an investigation through the Human Rights Office. The union cannot file a grievance on behalf of its workers until that process is complete. So that process is one that is also very lengthy. And what we're finding out from this report is actually insufficient. It's not doing what it's meant to do. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It helps, and I'll ask, I think, one more, Mr. Chair. There are circumstances when an individual would, I'll just call it loosely a complaint, but they open a case under human rights with respect to either an occurrence or something that's happening. That could be against the employer because of the system or the rule, whatever it is, or I think it could be against an individual, right, that is covered by the employer. Is there any pattern with respect to the IIU in terms of either of those streams, right? Is it more about people and behavior, or is the IIU more about people and systems?
We've tried to get clarity on that. There's just no clarity.
But from your experience though, right? Like you're hearing about it from the circumstances that you've heard about from your members, is there any pattern? I'm going to ask the staff about policy.
Yeah, I would be interested to hear the answer from the staff as well. In our mind, it's quite arbitrary. Like there doesn't seem to be a system in place that identifies what does and does not go through the IIU. And when we were confronted with this and when we found out that this was happening, and the city has the right to employ whoever they want in these units. But when we were confronted with the fact that there were former trained police interrogators who were questioning our members, we offered up to the city that perhaps we should have lawyers in the room to protect our members, because we don't know the kind of questions and the style of interrogation that they're being subjected to. The city took a lot of issue with that. So, we have a lot of concerns and questions as to what the city is doing, why they're doing it, and how they're doing it, because clearly their HRO office was not able to deal with the concerns that were being brought forward in workplaces.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Holliday, other questions of the deputant? Councillor Crisanti.
Thank you and good morning, and thanks for coming out this morning. I just need a little more information on what I believe I just heard a few minutes ago about over 2,000 cases. Did you use the word missed or it's still in queue to get looked after? What's the status of those 2,000 cases? And over what period of time, if you have that information?
What we have from the report is the inability of the office to investigate any of the approximately 2,400 inquiries received over 2 years.
Over 2 years, 2,400 inability in the sense that they're understaffed, in your opinion?
I believe they have 7, and I'm not sure that that's sufficient to address 2,400 complaints. My question would also be, maybe if we have better workspaces, you wouldn't have 2,400 complaints coming in.
Yeah, all right. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Crisanti. Other questions of staff on this item? Seeing none. Sorry, questions of the deputant. Sorry. Yep. Thank you very much. Our next deputant is Derek Moran. Morning, Derek.
Morning, Councillor Isaac. By me speaking at this meeting, this shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent expressed or implied. In doing so is fraud. God bless His Majesty the King, and long live His Majesty the King. Let the record show I do not consent to the warrantless searches taking place downstairs here at Toronto City Hall. Section 7 of the Constitution Act 1982 states that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof, and except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. As Section 28 of it states that technically, notwithstanding anything in this charter, the rights and freedoms referred to it are guaranteed equally to male and female persons. As nobody actually knows what the legal definition for person being used in this section is defined as in the Federal Interpretation Act, I'm just going to go ahead and claim the right and or freedom to the security of the person and the right not to be deprived of it. Now, nowhere in this 19-page report is there any mention of the right to freedom of expression. As Councillor Cheng knows, I was arrested, well, not me, but the person I have, at the April meeting this year at the police board because I wouldn't stop talking even though I still had 1 minute and 40 seconds left of my time, as I wanted to explain how Councillor Burnside had been screwed over by Mayor Chow and dumping him from the police board, even though the new Police Services Act says he could stay on as long as it had been 365 days since he was last a Toronto police officer. So in this report it says, this report provides an update on the data trends and information related to human rights inquiries and complaints involving the city in 2022-2023 through the city's internal human rights office or external legal processes. As a result of the matter at the police board that I just explained, This past Friday, I was involved in one of these external legal processes with the Corporation of the City of Toronto out at Markham Road in Shepherd in courtroom E10 involving Justice of the Peace Bentley Springer and City of Toronto prosecutor paralegal Manilova Tang. With me standing in the courtroom after having spoken with Justice of the Peace Springer for a couple minutes, both Manilova and JP Springer acknowledged that I was not the person charged in this matter, as they both kept stating that the person was not present in the courtroom. I want to thank them both for upholding my right to the security of the person and my right not to be deprived of it. I suppose, after pointing out to them that the Crown is the surety for the person I have, and that if I had ever led the court to believe in any way that I had any surety in this matter, then that would be a mistake, and that I ask the court to please forgive me. The problem with this is that after they both stated that the person charged was not present in the courtroom, the Justice of the Peace went ahead and entered a guilty plea. I just wanted to make it clear today on the record that I, Derek the man, did not plead guilty, nor did I ever identify myself as the person, and that I had started the matter off by saying, let the record show that I'm here by special appearance under protest, as I object to the jurisdiction, and I do not consent to being attorned, and it was actually Justice of the Peace Bentley Springer who pled guilty to the charge. Now, just to refresh Councillor Burnside's memory, he was there a year ago at the police board. Okay, that's not on. I want to point out to everybody, you may recall when Chief Demke mentioned that while also ensuring that the constitutionally protected right to the free speech and assembly is maintained, there are limits on rights. The right to safety and security does not mean people won't occasionally be uncomfortable when they hear things with which they disagree. And freedom of expression ends when it becomes criminal. So everyone else is aware, it also states in Article 3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. In R versus Hess, 1949, the BC Court of Appeal mentioned that Chief Justice Coke, advising the king on behalf of the judges, said, so the king cannot arrest any man because, as the Superior Court said in Halton Hills versus Kerouac, that ultimately sovereignty remains in the people. So the government had to create this legal fiction that really only exists on paper. It's an all capital letter name that you have, Councillor Ainsley. Remember, your grade school teacher never taught you to spell your name in all capital letters. And I just want to point out a tweet from Jennifer Pagliaro, who cited former city manager Chris Murray. And Chris Murray had said that senior members of the public service should expect to see their names in print and to be held to account. And can you encourage Councillor Burnside to run for mayor, Councillor Ainsley?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Derek. Much appreciated. Questions of the deputant? Councillor Burnside, do you have questions of the deputant? No? Okay. Thank you, Derek. Questions of staff on this item? No questions of staff? Councillor Cheng?
Thank you. I wonder if staff could address some of the concerns raised by the deputant with regard to lack of timely resolution, as well as the approach taken by investigative officers.
Good morning, and through the speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to address some of the concerns raised. The Human Rights Office is staffed by human rights practitioners and human rights lawyers who are experts in this field. And the language was used that 2,000 or so complaints were missed. That's entirely inaccurate. What the report shows is that about 2,000 inquiries were received by the Human Rights Office between 2022 and 2023. Those inquiries were all addressed in accordance with the policy and procedures. Nothing was missed. The Human Rights Office provides support to the divisions to be able to conduct investigations when we cannot. The Human Rights Office gives advisory services and support. So everything that's come to our office is addressed in accordance with the policy procedures, the legislative requirements of us, so under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, under the Human Rights Code, and we ensure that those processes are legally sound.
Thank you. And just wondering, how does this, the complaints filed here, how does it intersect with complaints filed to the Human Rights Commission?
Thank you for asking that clarifying question. So their complaints to the Human Rights Office are internal alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. So we try to take an early resolution approach to issues before they become litigation. It was stated earlier that individuals who come to the Human Rights Office cannot grieve, and I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding in the process. So the city has a human rights and anti-harassment discrimination policy, which applies to all employees. It also applies to management, of course, and so when an individual makes a human rights complaint under the policy, there's an obligation as an employer to address that concern. Those concerns can come to the Human Rights Office for extra support and guidance, and in some cases they're required to come to our office. For example, if we're talking about sexual violence, because of the expertise that we provide. So individuals, when they have a human rights complaint, can file a grievance at any time. They can file the grievance immediately. They can file the grievance depending on the process that they've undergone, whether it's the division taking on the investigation or the Human Rights Office. There's no barrier for individuals to file a grievance. The jurisdictional issue is that if someone files a grievance or goes to the Human Rights Tribunal, which is a legal proceeding, the Human Rights Office no longer has the ability to intervene. And the reason for that is that we're an early intervention office. So we're here to try to address issues early on, to take that preventative, restorative approach, to be timely, to avoid having to go to litigation. But if an individual decides to go down that road, they're absolutely entitled to do it. It just means the Human Rights Office is no longer involved. That's the distinction.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. And is this, I guess, widely known by staff about the options and where your jurisdiction ends if they go to the Human Rights Tribunal?
Absolutely. So our office, we do mandatory training, Human Rights 101 training for all employees. We have resources available. We have when to contact HRO guidelines, and anytime an individual contacts our office, we also provide them with, as much as possible, an array of options so that they can make an informed decision about what makes sense for them. They can consult with their union, they can come to us, they can do all sorts of processes. We let them know about, the time limitations of that. So we really want to empower people to make informed decisions on their rights because we are a neutral office. So we are constantly educating the organization, leadership, employees, and residents who come to our office through training and through communication with our team.
Great, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Cheng. Other questions of staff on this item? Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a little bit more about the process. So from the broadest perspective, all of the contacts with the Human Rights Office are deemed inquiries. But I guess, do I understand correctly, a portion of them would continue to become investigations? Is that true? Is that fair?
That's absolutely correct. So inquiries are any contact to our office, and from there we distinguish between complaints related and non-complaints related. And of the complaints related, a very small portion would actually be investigation files.
Okay, so I recall the number from the report. I have to flip through the pages to find it, but let's say it's about 1,100 or 1,200 over the last year or two, the trend. What percentage of the 1,100 or 1,200 would proceed to the investigation stage?
So I don't have that number because we don't have the capacity to track that at this time. What I can tell you is that in 2023, so we had about 1,200 inquiries. Of those that were jurisdictional, 465 were complaint related. So that's about 39% of all the inquiries to the Human Rights Office. And of that 39%, when we say complaint related, it could mean an individual coming with a complaint, but it can also mean a manager who's received something or has a concern that's coming to us for advice. So it can mean a few things.
Okay. Sorry, my microphone's not picking that up. So it sounds like over half of the inquiries are more general in nature, and a little bit less than half, so about 400, are a little bit more centered around a complaint. But within that, that divides even further, whether it's seeking advice about a complaint, as you said, from a manager, or an individual with a complaint. And then from that set, the HRO may be engaged further to conduct an investigation.
That's correct. And sorry, just to be clear, it's where there's maybe a legal requirement to investigate. So under the, for example, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, there may be a requirement to investigate. And then the HRO would do an assessment of whether we can investigate it, if we have jurisdiction, or the division, or the IIU, or whomever.
Okay, so this is what I was getting at. So it's either the responsibility of the division management to deal with the matter, or it could be a central responsibility, in which case the HRO would be working on behalf of the organization. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, so if the HRO is not leading the investigation, which is has always historically been a very small number of investigations that we lead, when divisions lead those investigations, the HRO is providing support to those divisions. So we're reviewing questions, we're giving that human rights advice throughout the process as much as needed.
Okay, so you're both an internal resource for advice. It sounds like you're also external facing, and you also may be a central function. It all depends on the case.
That's correct.
Okay, now of this investigations unit that was brought up in the deputation, could you tell the committee a little bit more about when they would become involved and why you would involve them?
Through the chair, perhaps I can take that question, Councillor. As Executive Director of Employee Relations, I oversee the Internal Investigations Unit. That unit takes on cases referred by divisions when they ask for assistance. So if the HRO were to refer a complaint back to a division, the division has the option to come to the IIU to ask for assistance. The IIU would then conduct that investigation if it was accepted, and they consult with the HRO before issuing their findings.
So the HR policy would govern whether or not a matter is directed back to the division, and then the division itself could ask for assistance through the investigation unit in conducting their work. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes. Through the chair, the division could elect to take it on themselves or request the IIU to take it on for them.
Okay, and then all of this is a subset of the broader field of complaints, which could also proceed through the grievance process. It could go to the ministry, or it could go to Human Rights Ontario.
Yes, through the speaker, or through the chair rather, we don't have control over where an employee brings their complaint. If they choose to file a grievance or choose to file a human rights tribunal complaint, obviously the employer cannot stop them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Holiday. Other questions on this item? Councillor Crisanti?
Thank you. I had to step away just for a couple of moments, and I apologize if this was already addressed. So again, just to pick up on what I asked the deputy earlier, and the response was, is there are over 2,400 cases that have been missed or still in queue over the last 2 years. Can you address that for me? And just let me know, I mean, we all know that this is all very important in terms of addressing these things in a timely manner.
Thank you. Through the speaker, happy to clarify. So over the last 2 years, I think that the number we were throwing around is about 2,000 inquiries. None of those have been missed, and there is no queue. So the inquiries were all addressed appropriately within the procedures and policies. So we have a legal obligation to intervene and assess complaints, and inquiries can mean any contact with the Human Rights Office. Of those, there's a small subset that are complaint related. In 2023, that was about 39%. And the Human Rights Office will assess each and every one and ensure that they're responded to accordingly. What that means is that the HRO is not necessarily taking on an investigation, but they're providing support to divisions who may be investigating on that process to make sure that it's legally sound, to make sure that they have the human rights expertise and advice that they need to be able to do that. So nothing has been missed, and there is no backlog.
Good, that's good news, but when does it moved from an inquiry to an actual investigation. So you've had over 2,000 inquiries, but of those, I would suspect you feel need to be investigated. And so what do those numbers look like? And how are we progressing with those issues?
Thank you. Through the speaker. It's an assessment that happens. So certainly of the 1,190, for example, from 2023, that subset of 39% represents jurisdictional complaint-related concerns. Of those, that could be an individual coming forward with a complaint, or it could be management or an HR professional coming for advice on how to address a concern. So it's not representative of each inquiry and specific complaint. We don't have the numbers on what converts to an investigation. What I can say is that whenever there is a complaint that we've assessed requires an investigation, HRO will be lending that support to the division or to the investigator as needed to make sure that they have that human rights knowledge and support.
So closure is put to every call that comes in, to every complaint, every issue. It goes full cycle to some form of closure, so everyone's satisfied.
So the idea is, of course, to have folks satisfied. As you can imagine, in a complaint, that's not always achievable, but there is closure. And we always are engaged in looking at how do we restore the workplace, are there recommendations to prevent and address and remedy in the future as well. But absolutely, whenever there's a concern raised to our office, we address it in our SLAs.
So how is your office staffed? What a total number of people in your office?
We currently have 9 full-time staff in our office.
And are you comfortable that that's adequate? We are in budget season here. You could ask for more.
I think that, we have really wonderful people on the team, and we do the best that we can to support the organization.
So you're comfortable with the level of staff you have? But maybe you don't want to answer that now.
We're committed to doing this work well, and so as you can see that there's a lot of inquiries to our office. We've seen a 43% increase since 2019 of inquiries to our office, and that's we want to make sure that we're doing the best we can by the organization. We also serve the public. So, we're always happy to receive support and continue to do the good work that we do.
All right, that's fine. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Maybe you could take the lead at budget time on advocating for more staff.
Yeah, absolutely. That's no, I'm just thinking about that now.
I believe that's all the questions of staff on this item. Speakers? Somebody like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Chang. All in favor? That carries. Our next item is GG 18.36, the 2023 update on fire and life safety compliance with the City of Toronto. We have one registered speaker, Keith Fearing from QP Local 79. Morning, sir. You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Just give me 1 second here. My name's Keith Fearing. I'm First Vice President, QP Local 79. I have a history with the local in being heavily involved in health and safety throughout the city. And basically across all divisions, I've been working in health and safety and representing workers since 2010 around health and safety. I come from so far back that I understand why the new it's not new anymore, but the FLS group is in place. We understood what happened in the past and why we had to change the systems. That system change has been great. I believe our own joint health and safety committees have been able to look at their responsibilities, look at fire extinguishers. There's little QR codes now. There's different technologies being used for these inspections, and I believe that the work being done is great work. And congrats on 93%. Of course, we want 100% compliance, but in general, the work's been great. However, I'm here on a different issue. In the course of this work, our members, Local 79 members, have been exposed to lead in their work. Birmingham and, what's the other address? Les Mill Road are police facilities that have shooting ranges. Our workers have been going into these work locations unprotected, not aware of their rights around designated substances, and exposed to lead. There's been other members of other locals that have also been exposed, and quite heavily, but I am only here to speak to 79 and the responsibilities of safety around this employer. We have 8 or 10, forgive me on the numbers, folks who have elevated blood levels, lead in their blood, sorry. And this is a direct result of inspecting the shooting ranges. Going in, doing their work, which is great work, coming out exposed to lead repetitively. Some of these inspections are monthly, maybe even more frequent, I'm not sure. And so there's a problem with that. And the problem is our corporate health and safety policy says that we will meet or exceed, right, the Occupational Health and Safety Act and our responsibilities as a city around health and safety. The most disturbing fact was this became known in November-ish of last year, 2023, and the work continued, the work direction continued to go into these spaces without the proper PPE. We've just been through a pandemic. We are all now aware, whether we want to be or not, of what PPE is. Our members were still performing this work into April of 24, sorry. Even though some of the the air quality testers from the city went in and tested the air quality, they went in with full protection, which is the way it should be. Yet the day after and the day after and the day after, our members were going in without protection. This is concerning to Local 79. The ministry orders were also concerning because it put the responsibility on the police stations. But those are our members. We're employed by a certain division here at the city, and they were instructed and directed to go out, even as the ought to have known limit was reached. And that's our concern for our membership. We had a town hall around this. I forget the date now. Sometime in, I'm not going to be able to pull that out of my memory. And we heard from members, which we tend to do, because they have the stories. And on those phone calls, they talk about how this is affecting their lives. Lead affects your abdomen, it affects your blood pressure. It's transferable if you're pregnant and having a child. We want to bring this issue forward. We want to give credit to the work that's being done, but we also want to ensure our workers are safe and protected, not just on a go-forward basis, but at all points in time. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the deputant? Councillor Holyday?
Mr. Fearing, thanks for talking to us. I just want to make sure I better understand what you've brought to us today. How many workers and at each location?
So I don't know the workers' locations. The locations they inspected, though, were Les Mill and Birmingham.
Les Mill, and those are shooting ranges?
Those are police stations that have, one's the college in Birmingham, the other one's the emergency task force in Les Mill.
Okay.
And yes, they have shooting ranges.
So what was the work that the employees were doing?
They inspect fire equipment.
Oh, okay. Okay, now I really need to understand. So they go in and they look at the fire extinguishers and the systems and the records and all the steps in the inspection. At those locations, how is that connected, though, to lead?
They're shooting ranges.
Okay.
And lead bullets exist. Lead is on the floor. Lead is currently through the vent system sitting there. There's been a cleanup done and a subsequent testing around lead, like touch testing, right? There's still lead in the facility, even after extensive cleaning.
So
that gets disturbed and then breathed in and absorbed.
for a inexperienced person, like maybe like dust? Is that?
It could be dust, yeah, it could be many different, it could be, lead is generally heavy, but it depends on the particulate size. It either is gonna sink, it's either gonna catch on your clothing, you're gonna take that clothing home, launder it, spread it to the family. Your shoes, obviously, your hands, wherever, so think of dust in your home, wherever there's dust, but the potential for dust.
Is there anything about fire inspection work that elevates the risk beyond that of anyone else in the building?
I don't think so. What elevates the risk is the employer.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about bullets and lead? I don't know. I'm assuming it's an ingredient, so what is, how does that all tie together?
So you can go to the Mayo Clinic website if you like and look up lead poisoning, and you'll see that bullets are composed of lead, and it is one of the main identifiers of potential lead poisoning on that website. Because they exist, they get shot, the expenditure happens from the bullet, and lead can potentially comes out and does come out. And to be very clear about it, on the police side, there's no exposure because they're provided the PPE.
Okay.
Right? So you have people who are utilizing actually practice target, right? Doing target practice or whatever they call it. I don't know that terminology. They are doing that work, they're doing that stuff, and then they are being supplied the appropriate PPE as they're in the area where the shooting would occur. I'm not saying that lead exists in the office on the 3rd floor, if there is a 3rd floor.
Okay.
But it exists in the facility where the shooting would take place. Then, of course, you disrobe. Our members were never provided that opportunity and trained and educated on that. They were not provided any type of PPE to go in and take and have the lead stop being absorbed by them, either through ventilation, through breathing, or through skin absorption.
Okay.
Right? They were plain clothes, basically, and going in and doing this work and taking that from workspace to workspace through their vehicle to home. So the difference is that one side was protected, one side wasn't.
And so what's
of folks whose job it would be to be in that area.
What's the PPE that they need?
In my opinion, without being an absolute professional on it, they should be getting masks, they should be getting goggles, they should be potentially getting a hazmat suit, and then slip booty, I don't know what you call them, booty covers, I'll call them. Something to slip over your shoes.
And how often do they visit the facilities, or are they there every day?
I would expect that there's a monthly inspection. Fire extinguishers have that requirement.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Councillor Burnside.
Yeah, thanks, through you. So, how long, do you know how long they're in these stations while they do these inspections? Do you know how long they're there for?
How long the in and out is?
Yeah,
No, I cannot supply that information. But I would expect that you have to go in there, find the equipment, do your check. It's got to be at least 5 minutes, and it could be up to half an hour. Who knows? It depends on
I don't
where the equipment is. Every site would be different. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any information on the impacts of the exposure? Or is this just more?
Impacts?
Yeah.
So like I said, so like to your person?
Well, to the individual is a question, because I have to think that there have to be some sort of guidelines in terms of, you know, you can be exposed to lead. You know, I know lead exposure when you're young is a lot different than when you're old.
Yeah.
They're both bad. I'm not.
Oh, yeah.
saying that, but the effects. So I'm just trying to understand, was this exposure within the guidelines, or was it outside the guidelines?
Outside of the guidelines. The thing that ran it up the pole, the red flag up the pole, was the individual from another local who's, see, you can accumulate over time.
Oh, okay.
And you can accumulate a little bit, right? But it's the continuous accumulation that ends up having that effect on you, right? So at some point, your body basically says, well, that's enough. And now you're over the recommended limits, and you are now into feeling the physical effects of it, right?
Impacts, okay.
And so the effects of a different member from a different local was such that they were hospitalized.
Oh, okay.
And that's what ran the concern around. And then we started, there was direction to our employees, to our members to get their blood tested. And that's where we found out the results.
So no,
working in
okay,
these areas.
so that's helpful. So since April 2024, I assume they've been supplied proper equipment, or they're not going in anymore?
I don't believe they stopped going in. There's a requirement to test your fire equipment, right? So, so there was always requests to keep going in.
No, but
There
did they
was,
get,
yes, I'm
the
getting
PPE?
there. Then, but there was always the struggle to get the PPE. While we were on our town hall, one of our members was instructed to go to Birmingham and inspect, and there was still an issue around PPE.
But respectfully,
Yep.
I don't think you answered my question.
Okay, sorry.
The date of April 2024 was mentioned.
Yep.
I'm trying to understand, has the issue been addressed from a PPE standpoint as of April or not?
I believe that the PPE requirements are now known and are being supplied.
Okay.
However, what isn't being addressed is the lead throughout the building, because the building is bigger than the shooting range, right?
So then presumably, yeah, I mean, this could be a huge issue. So presumably then all the other staff that are there, police officers, admin, civilians, all that, they have that same issue, yeah? Okay. Last question is, what would you like to see? Because I'm always trying to understand, like now that I would assume it's twofold. One, the proper equipment, and that's being addressed. So what would you now like us to do?
In general, and I've had conversations with various councillors around health and safety at the city manager signs off on city policy, and it's left to divisions to implement the policy with the assistance of corporate health and safety. What we're consistently finding across the city, don't forget how long I've been with the health and safety organization at Local 79, is that divisions do their thing with the assistance of corporate. There is no one individual that anyone has to answer to internally to say, are you doing what you're supposed to do? Any health and safety activist says it's prevention. You don't go at this after the fact. I want to see prevention city, not only in this specific item, because I could sit here all day and talk things about health and safety. I'm not going to. I would like to see that on a go-forward basis that there is actual responsibility around this issue. The fact that this was known in November and there is still debate as to whether they're getting the proper PPE in these spaces is problematic. That shows that there's no, there's
commitment?
no being proactive around the health and safety approach.
Okay, thanks.
That's what I want to see.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnside. Other questions of the deputant? Seeing none. I just wanted to ask, how many grievances have your members filed?
On this issue, because I can't give you on this issue, we have filed a policy grievance. Typically, policy grievances go first, and then the individual grievances are filed after that because the policy has to resolve. So right now we are at one which we consider a large type, not an important, the most important grievance.
Okay, and how long does that take to resolve?
2 to 4 years.
2 to 4 weeks? Okay.
Years.
Okay, and then in the meantime, so are your members going to their supervisors and saying, we have a problem here, we fear we're being exposed to lead, we don't have the
That has all
proper
been done,
equipment?
that was done since November, yes. And our folks are there too. And even while making those complaints, there are still issues getting the PPE dealt with accordingly.
Do you have any idea of how many individual grievances your members are expected to file?
That's hard to say. It's an individual basis, and there's relationships in the workspace where sometimes if you pop up to make a complaint, you get pushed down. So and then other times you don't. But there's relationship issues in the workspace that we cannot provide you as an individual. In my opinion, everyone who's affected should be filing a grievance.
Okay, and how many members are you talking about?
I think it's over 10.
10? Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, we're going to bring it back into committee. Questions of staff on this item? Sorry, councillors, we're on questions of staff. No questions of staff? Okay, can I have somebody move the report? Moved by Councillor Crisanti, all in favor? That carries. Our next item is GG 18.39, temporary suspension of Duran, Ontario Limited. We have 3 registered speakers. First registered speaker is Jonathan Frustagilio. My apologies, from Sutherland Law. We're on number 39.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on the time, Mr. Chairman.
You're right in that gray area.
Right in that gray area.
Sorry, and Sabrina?
Sabrina Warich. Sabrina Warich. I think we're going to reverse the order if that's okay with Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Ms. Warich will proceed first, and then I will proceed second.
Your microphone on?
Apologies, can you hear
That's
me?
okay.
Sorry, we just have a preliminary issue we want to raise just before we start. I know we asked that this portion of the meeting be closed due to the... Sorry, just due to the nature of the KPMG audit report, we're asking that this meeting portion be closed, given that the report is preliminary and it's been addressed to the legal counsel of the city.
No. Sorry, you have 5 minutes to make a presentation.
So I'm a lawyer from Sutherland Law representing Duran, Ontario. We're here to address the 4-month temporary suspension. Duran opposes this suspension. The CPO has already issued a 6-month temporary suspension, which is set to end December of this year on December 7th, and the maximum allowed under the procedure. It's unfair to impose additional suspensions on Duran, who has already faced irreparable harm. Moreover, there's no clear end to the investigation despite the CPO's statement on October 9th that it was complete. No authority has been provided for conducting this process in a way that contradicts the policies and procedures. Furthermore, it is ironic that Patrick Matozo, the executive director of the Corporate Real Estate Management Division, recommended a suspension of Duran when he himself was unable to manage his own department in respect of the St. Lawrence Market project. When he acknowledged the mismanagement within his own department, this was reported by CBC on July of this year. The city needs $9.5 million to finish the St. Lawrence Market building. On October 9th, the city notified Duran of a recommendation to suspend them from bidding for 5 years based on a final report from KPMG. Duran was given 30 days to respond. To properly defend itself, Duran requested several documents, including the memo outlining the suspension recommendation and the KPMG final report. Duran also requested an extension to provide a full response. Duran submitted its response on November 7th, just before the deadline, without the requested documents. On November 8th, the CPO informed us that their report had been submitted to your committee. After receiving Duran's objection on November 7th, the CPO changed their position and requested more time to investigate. Duran's letter highlighted the unfairness of the process, the irreparable harm being caused by Duran, and pointed out that the emails with KPMG showed the audit had not been completed. Contrary to the CPO's claim, and I quote, KPMG has concluded the audit and submitted a final report to the city on October 8th. It is clear the CPO is now attempting to backtrack on their initial position after being served with Duran's objecting submissions, which have challenged the validity of the CPO's utterly wrongful request for a maximum penalty. There was no new evidence put forth by Duran or KPMG that would change the city's initial position or cause them to investigate further. Rather, this just shows the city's decision as premature. Any further temporary suspension of Duran beyond the 6 months would be unfair and prejudicial. The investigation by the CPO and KPMG has been ongoing since September 2023. It is unjust for Duran to face another temporary suspension, which is not permitted, allowing the CPO to continue investigating indefinitely without any clear deadline in sight to complete this investigation. Duron has been cooperative and transparent during the entire investigation. Its willingness to cooperate and resolve internal issues has been clearly communicated to the city on multiple occasions. However, the city has tried to deprive Duron of procedural fairness and cause harm to their business and reputation. Duron has already faced irreparable harm because back in August of 2023, the City of Toronto acknowledged that this investigation and the allegations of Duron overbilling the city had leaked to the media. As a result of the publicity of the matter, Duron faced extensive harm to their reputation, including impacting their contract with the Toronto District School Board and harming their business relationship with their own bank. Duron has once again become the topic of discussion as the Toronto Star has released a story about the suspension in yesterday's paper. The article reveals that the CPO emailed the Toronto Star in response to their request for comment. It is also worth noting that Duron has always maintained it would write a check for the overbilled amounts, although for some reason the city has refused to accept that. The procedures are clear. The goal of suspension is not meant for the purpose of punishing a supplier, but rather determined on a balanced review of whether the supplier's conduct presents a risk to the city's valid commercial or business interests. Contrary to the goal of suspension, any further temporary suspension will have the effect of punishing the supplier, in this case Duron. If the purpose of this suspension is to determine whether Duron's conduct presents a risk to the city's valid commercial or business interest, why did they wait over a year to start the audit process? The city sent Duron a notice of audit on August 2nd, 2022. Duron confirmed that they would cooperate with that audit on August 12th, 2022. Yet KPMG was retained on September 6th, 2023. That is more than a year after they sent Duron a notice of audit. We note that this report was not produced until last week Friday, well after business hours. In consideration of the irreparable harm faced by Duron, any further suspension will operate more as punishment to Duron as a company, the individual employees, and their families who had no involvement with the overbilling. The survival of this company is at stake, as well as the jobs of hundreds of employees.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, or good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and councilors. This committee should consider Duron's response. The response does not support the notion that there is any risk to the city. Upon discovery of the discrepancies raised by Arcadis, Duron took immediate action to investigate and resolve issues. People were fired and new policies were implemented to further prevent this from happening moving forward. Duron shared all of this information and details with their investigation, first with Arcadis and then with KPMG, the third-party auditor. In making the decision based on a balanced review, the committee should also consider the total price of both projects against the amount that was overbilled. The overbilled amount is less than 1%. The scope and duration of any punishment should be consistent with what is necessary to ensure that the city's commercial interests are adequately protected. We submit that the harm to Duron far outweighs any potential harm to the city's commercial interests. A continued temporary suspension or final suspension would operate as a punishment to Duron, which is not the goal of the policies or the procedures in place under the supplier suspension procedure. Finally, Duron should not be penalized or punished for the CPO's failure to effectively and efficiently investigate the matter. The delay in completing the investigation should not fall at the feet of Duron or its employees, especially given Duron's willingness to cooperate at all stages of this process and taking their own positive steps to resolve the issues from the very beginning. It is also of serious concern that while the CPO has stepped back from their position on recommending a final penalty, it has found other ways to punish Duron. More specifically, on November 12, 2024, Duron was informed that $1 million would be withheld from Duron on funds owed through other projects until such time as the investigation is complete, without any justification or substantiation for that $1 million withholding of funds. The city would be well aware that if Duron takes any steps to object or commence any proceedings related to that decision, then it would disqualify Duron from any bidding on future projects, which has the same effect as a temporary suspension while this investigation remains ongoing. By agreeing to suspend Duron here today, the committee is only endorsing actions to conduct themselves that contravene their own policies and procedures. Duron requests that this committee consider all aspects of the matter before determining that any suspension is necessary. We repeat and reiterate that the goal of the suspension is not to punish under the supplier suspension procedure. and it should be based on a process that has fully unfolded and been completed. The city's inaccurate representation on the October 9th, 2024 letter proposed suspension are a clear example of the intent to punish Duron. There is nothing that has changed since the October 9th, 2024 letter from the city when it was proposing a 5-year suspension to the date of the new proposal for a 4-month temporary suspension, aside from receiving Duron's objection letter. Duron has been in existence for over 60 years. It employs over 100 employees. Duron has completed work with the city since the 1980s. It has a strong relationship with the city, the Toronto Transit Commission, Toronto District School Board, and Metrolinx. Duron has a strong reputation with its clients and takes pride in all of the work that it performs throughout this city. Something to be mindful of is the following. With respect to the projects that are under investigation, Duron's bid came in at $1.5 million less than the next competitive bid in the process. Therefore, if we consider that number, had Duron not been awarded those projects and those contracts, the cost of the city would have been 10 times more than the cost of the overbilling found by the city and KPMG. The city would have faced more financial harm if Duron was not awarded the contracts than the harm that it was caused due to the overbilling by a few rogue employees, which Duron has accepted responsibility for and has taken active steps to protect against those issues moving forward. Duron is sorry that this happened. It should never have happened to begin with. Duron doesn't have an excuse for what happened with respect to those former employees. Duron has and will continue to be responsible for the actions of the employees as it ultimately bears the responsibility for anything related to the company as a whole. Duron is ashamed of what happened because it is not a reflection of the company's practices or culture over the last 60 years of conducting business in this province, and particularly over the last 50 approximately years, 40 years, doing business with the city.
Sorry, that's your 10 minutes. Yep. Thank you. Any questions of the deputants?
That councillors may have.
Questions of the deputants? Seeing none, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Chris Economiou, of Duron, Ontario Incorporated. Okay, all right, thank you. We'll be bringing this into committee. Questions of staff? No questions of staff? Speakers? I'll move the recommendations in the report. All in favor? That carries. Okay, that is all of our items with deputants. We're going back to number 3. Sorry, I have 2 items. Number 3 was held by Councillor Mansis. Councillor Mansis would like to release it. He's had his questions answered by staff, so I will move the recommendations. Number 3, all in favor? That carries. And sorry, just while we're on that, Councillor Crisanti wanted to introduce a new item of business. Yeah, so.
Yes, do I just introduce it now? Can we deal with
Yep,
it?
you can introduce it now.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair. So this recommendation reads that City Council requests the Chief Financial Officer in consultation with the Chief Procurement Officer to review the historic use of contract and purchase order amendments and report to the General Government Committee in the third quarter of 25 with findings, including recommendations to update the contract and purchase order amendment process and delegation of financial authority as required to better define the parameters and rationalize the process. That's my recommendation, Mr. Chair, and
okay, all in favor of introducing it? That carries. Do you want to hold it down? All in favor of it? Yep, that carries. All right, thank you. Our next item of business is GG 18.5, amendment to blanket contract number 47024891 with CBV Collection Services Limited 470248892 with Gatestone Incorporated and Co. Incorporated, and 4702-4893 with Partners in Credit Incorporated for the collection services for Provincial Offences Act fines for court services held by Councillor Chang. Sorry, I skipped.
Thank you. I've had all my questions answered offline, so I'm happy to move the item.
Okay, Councillor, anybody else have questions of staff on this item? Councillor Chang is moving the recommendations in GG 18.6. All in favor? That carries. My apologies, we're going back one. GG 18.5, amendment to blanket contract number 470-22502 with Redflex Traffic Systems Canada Limited for the provision of automated speed enforcement cameras held by Councillor Chang.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a few questions. So this is saying we have an additional $11 million due to an additional 75 cameras. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so how many cameras total does this contract cover?
The current contract is 75 cameras, and we're asking to amend the contract for an additional 75, so it will be a total of 150.
So 150 cameras, and that costs us $36 million?
That is correct.
And that includes all the data that's transferred, the maintenance of the units, and the moving of the units?
That's correct. The vendor is responsible for the full maintenance or any replacement of cameras.
And what has been the frequency of replacements? I see throughout the city, you know, they do get vandalized quite often. Is that happening a lot?
We do see frequent vandalism, but, you know, it's dealt with at a very quick pace, and the vendor, there has not been any issues with the vendors.
Right. And in terms of cost recovery, with regard to the charges that are the tickets that are resulting from these cameras, what is the percentage of cost recovery that happens?
I wouldn't have that information on me. I don't know if maybe courts or revenue services would like to answer that.
Through the chair, well, I don't have the exact numbers on us. I know we do look at both the initial costs as well as some of the operating costs that may reside in revenue services, court services, even transportation services, and compare that to the revenue that's collected. And generally, while it may change depending on the amount of cameras, we do see that there is no net cost to the city as a result of the implementation of the cameras.
Great, thank you. Those are all my questions, and I'm happy to move the item if no one else has questions.
Councillor Holiday, questions of staff?
Thanks, Chair. It's a quick question. I noticed that some fixed cameras are being installed, like they look a little different. They're on a pole. They don't look like they're mobile. Is that inside this contract?
So I think you're talking about permanent sites.
Yes.
So it takes a considerable amount of time to build permanent sites, especially if there's no convenient access to a power source. So it's obviously more expensive to do so as well, given the camera infrastructure and civil work required. The cost, the city will have 25 existing, of the existing 75 cameras converted to permanent.
Oh, okay.
And we'll investigate the feasibility of converting another 25 of the new 75 cameras that would be asked for in this contract.
Okay, so the total number of cameras in the city remains at 150.
Currently, it's 150. With this amendment, it will go to 150. Currently it's 75. With this amendment, it will go to 150.
Right, and so within that 150 total, it could include 25 to 50 permanent installations, but it's all within.
Correct.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Holiday. Bring it into committee. Speakers? Councillor Chang's moving. All right. All in favor? Moved by Councillor Chang. That carries. We're on GG 18.8, amendment to purchase order number 6053869 with Montgomery Sysom Architects Incorporated for long-term care redevelopment project for senior services and long-term care in Ward 23, held by Councillor Cheng.
I also had my questions answered offline and happy to move.
Okay. Anybody else on this item for questions of staff? Speakers, moved by Councillor Chang, on favor. That carries. Hold on just a moment. The clerk doesn't think we'll be done in 10 minutes. I disagree, but the clerk wants me to move a motion. Do you want to extend to finish?
Just in case.
Okay, all in favor? That carries. I still think we can do it in 10 minutes. Our next item is GG 18.10, amendment to purchase order number 6051765 with CS&P Architects Incorporated for design and construction of professional services for the new Davisville Community Aquatic Center Net Zero facility, held by Councillor Cheng.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm wondering how many times has this come back to General Government Committee for an increase?
The second time. Through the chair, this is the second time this purchase order is being amended.
And how much was the contingency fund? That was exhausted. It says that the contingency fund was exhausted.
I can get back to you, but typically we will carry 10% contingency.
So that contingency was exhausted, so now needs to be replenished?
Yes.
And what percentage of the 500,000 is going towards construction or being held for contingency?
I think we are not adding any contingency. We removed that. And all work is, all the new funds are going to the identified work. There is no contingency.
So now if anything else happens, it will come back and we'll have to approve a further increase then. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the concern, but there is a rule around that. We are not allowed to carry more than certain percentage of contingency when we add additional funds.
And is fulfilling the net zero requirement one of the, I guess, key challenges that has resulted in these increases?
Yeah, through the chair, during the detailed design, the standards for the buildings change and net zero requirement came in later. And not only that, the community centers are developed through public input and design keeps evolving and not exact scope is known at the time when the consultant is selected. That is one of the reasons that some changes happen.
Mm-hmm. And do you foresee further increases in the future as this project continues to build out?
Through the chair, at this point, we don't anticipate, but the nature of the construction cannot be predicted. And yeah, we'll keep you updated.
Great, thank you. Those are all my questions and happy to move staff recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chang. Other questions on this item? Seeing none. Speakers, Councillor Chang, you held the item.
Happy to move staff recs.
Okay, there is a revised rec that was posted today. All in favor of the revised recommendation? Any opposed? Seeing none, that carries. We are on, number GG 18.20, non-competitive contract with HP Canada for supply and provision of single multifunction printers, plotters, and related maintenance and services, held by Councillor Chang. Councillor Chang, questions of staff?
Thank you. Is this an extension of a contract to bridge towards potentially looking for other vendors in the future?
Through the chair, yes, it is an extension of the current contract because we have underspent the value of the contract we had. And yes, at the end of the 2 years, we would go to market.
And what kind of service standards or quality measurements are being taken while we are using this vendor?
We do have, through the chair, we do have service levels through our contract with HP. So it varies on the type of service or type of issue.
So the reason I flag this is because here at Northwork Center, we got a new printer a few months ago, and we've already had several challenges in the last 6 months. And obviously printing is a big part of our operations. So just wondering, is that something that we've seen across the city with brand new devices, or is this one here at Northwork Center an anomaly?
Through the chair, I would have to take a look at what's happening with the specific printer at North York Civic Center. We have not had an uptick of issues, I would say. I mean, printers generally can be kind of finicky, but we can certainly take a look at your situation.
Great, thank you. That's all my questions, and I can move staff recs if there's no other questions.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions on GG 18.20? Seeing none, speakers, moved by Councillor Chang, on favor? That carries. Our next item, next item is GG 18.21, non-competitive contract with Moore Canada Corporation for the provision of renewal forms and parking permits, held by Councillor Crisanti. Councillor Crisanti, number 21. Questions of staff?
Now I'm happy to release it.
Okay.
And I'll move the item.
Councillor Crisanti, any other questions of staff on this item? Councillor Crisanti is moving the recommendations on number 21. On favor? That carries. GG 18.24 is our next item, amendment to purchase order number 604-7137 with North Tunnel Construction ULC for the construction of the Coxwell Bypass Tunnel between Ashbridges Bay Treatment Plant and Coxwell Ravine Park, held by Councillor Holiday. Councillor Holiday, questions of staff? We will skip over this one then until the end. Yep. So our next item, 37. Our next item is GG 18.37, status of iOS airdrop functionality on city devices. I would like to defer this until our next meeting. All in favor of the deferral? That carries. I believe we are.
Okay. Yep, it is our last item. So let's go to close. So we need a. I don't think we need to. This is for the check.
4 minutes.
You're going to release it?
All right, so we have a motion on the screen to go in camera on. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Chair, I'll do my best to read in the microphone. That the General Government Committee recess its public session to meet in closed session to consider the following. GG 18.24, amendment to purchase order number 604-7137 with North Tunnel Constructors ULC for the construction of the Coxwell Bypass Tunnel between Ashbridges Bay Treatment Plant and Coxwell Ravine Park in wards 10, 11, 13, 14, and 15. The reason for confidentiality is litigation or potential litigation that affects the City of Toronto, advice or communications that are subject to solicitor-client privilege and litigation privilege, a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the city.
All in favor? That carries. So I just respectfully ask any members of staff and also members of the public If they could please vacate this room, and we will deal with this item in camera, and then we will come back into public at the conclusion of the item. And we'll give staff a couple of minutes. Thank you. Counselor Chang came back. We're okay now. So if you can let him know. All right, I can resume the meeting. What's number 24 called? All right, so I am calling the public portion of this meeting back to order. We're currently dealing with GG 18.24, an amendment to purchase order number 6047137 with the North Tunnel Construction ULC for the construction of the Coxwell Bypass Tunnel between Ashbridges Bay Treatment Plant and Coxwell Ravine Park. We have the recommendations before us. Councillor Holiday, would you like to move the recommendations? Or do you want me to do it? I will move the recommendations. All in favor of the recommendations? That carries. I believe that concludes our business for recommendations before us. Councillor Holiday, would you like the confirmatory bill in front of us before us? Or do you want me to do it? Councillor Crisanti, I will move the recommendations. All in favor of the recommendations? That carries. I believe that concludes our business for, what is that?
That's really good. How'd you do that, Paul?
How did my in-laws get into the IT system?
Are we done?
All right, Councillor Crisanti, if you could read the confirmatory bill, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that confirmatory bills to confirm the legislative proceedings of the General Government Committee acting under delegated authority at meeting 18 of November 20th, 2024 be declared as bylaws and passed subject to section 226.9 of the City of Toronto Act 2006.
All in favor of the confirmatory bill? That carries. Meeting adjourned. Councillor Holiday, all in favor? That carries. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.